Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. I am your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to episode 170 of the podcast. I'm very happy to be here with you, and I'm even more grateful for you being a part of my listening audience. I'm very eager to get into this week's title and topic, and the title for this episode is Habituate the Standards. And this episode was actually inspired from a conversation that I was having with one of my sons. And as any intentional parent knows, parenting does not stop just because our children have reached adulthood or young adulthood. And as we guide and we share information, we want to give them everything that they need, tools, resources, so that they can make the best choices to achieve their goals, to be safe, healthy, and happy. And so, in having this conversation with my son recently, I was sharing with him some pitfalls that I see that impact people's opportunity to live what some may call their best life. No matter how much potential any of us have, if we don't habituate the standards, if we don't set a course for ourselves where we are just doing the basics, then we fall so far behind. And so what I'll say as we begin is, as Black people in North America, we have, as a group, we have acclimated to mediocre and a subpar means of living in just about every aspect of our lives here in North America, whether that's our health and diet, our family structure, our educational attainments, and what we can produce with the education that we have economically, and just our virtues and our morals in general. And whether we can attribute this subpar means of living to mental conditioning or force through the servitude, enslavement that we've experienced as a people, I believe that it is fair to say that as a people, we are not generally primed, nor are we positioned for successful outcomes. If we were to review statistics, and I've shared statistics on this podcast before, whether it's regarding married births versus unwed births, whether we're talking about health and illness and diseases, home ownership and economic attainment, what we're able to do with the education that we have, we, to a great extent, lead in most of the negative statistics as a group here in North America. And what I recommend is that we go back and think about how we are living, think about how we've been trained, think about how we've been conditioned, and that we accustom ourselves to the standards so that doing the basics will be the norm. There is a joke within the Black community, and we talk about CP time, right? Colored people's time. It's very common that we joke or we just acknowledge that Black people are going to be late. And I don't think that it's cute. I don't think that it's something that we should normalize lateness. We shouldn't. Now, whether that's late to school, late to work, late to whatever, If we give our word or have an expectation that we're going to be somewhere at a designated time, for us to have a habit of lateness, well, that's insufficient, and we should not accept that. We should not just permit that as a standard way of living, and that's just one example. But for us, first of all, we need to know what standards are, what the standard is. Now, that standard can be defined through you through your religious practice, through your cultural values, through your ethnic values. Many of us, just because we're all black, we may not all have the same traditional backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. However, there are just some standards that are that go across the board. And if I'm talking about health, for example, having a healthy blood pressure, regardless of your cultural or ethnic background, that should be the standard. Having a healthy weight should be the standard. Having money saved for emergencies should be a healthy standard. Being on time and performing our duties that we're being paid for at our jobs should be the standard. When we go to school, if we're a student, whether that's elementary, high school, university, trade school, completing assignments, attendance, and participation should just be the standards. And so we should accustom ourselves to the standards and make doing the basics our norm. That should just be normative for us. And I'll add that if we incorporate good habits into our lifestyle, then those times that we fall off or fall short, those few moments will not hurt us as much as having a lifestyle that's subpar, having a lifestyle that's substandard, and creating legacies or continuing legacies that are substandard. A moment where we fall off is not going to be as damaging to us in the long run. However, we shouldn't permit ourselves excuses. And we can be very, very good to create excuses. We should not permit ourselves to make excuses. We should not permit in a substandard, a subpar way of living, especially when it's not necessary. And there are some circumstances that we face where we just may not be able to meet up to the standard. But we should be uncomfortable with that. That should nag us like a pebble in the shoe. There are emergent or urgent circumstances where you may be late to work or late dropping your child off at school. There may be times where, our savings isn't as padded as it should be because of some urgent or emergent circumstance. However, when we just justify breaking or violating principles and operating in a substandard way, when we justify that, when we excuse that, what we can do is allow ourselves or create the conditions where we become accustomed to operating in an inferior manner or living in subpar conditions. I'll use public housing as an example, and many of our people live in public housing or receive government assistance. However, we want that to be the extreme. We want that to be the exception, but not the rule. Sometimes, we may need help. We may need to live in public housing. However, we don't want to have that as a legacy that we pass on to our children. We want that to be a short-term thing and not a long-term thing, not a lifestyle. But some of us just accept subpar conditions, inferior practices. We just allow that. And so then our supervisors have to deal with that at work. The teachers and professors have to deal with that at school. Our health suffers because we choose not to eat in a way that supports and maintains good health. Our finances suffer because we're not doing what we should do or could do to have a decent budget or a decent savings. Housework, right? Even if we don't engage in housework, if we allow our homes to become dirty, we don't cook for our families, well, we become habituated to that. Our children can become habituated to takeout. And so they have a desire for takeout or fast food. And we know that these foods can become addictive. They're made to be addictive. I was listening to a show and someone was talking about folks who work for Nabisco. They will not buy Oreos. They will not bring that to their homes because they know that they manufacture these products so that it's hard to consume just one or just one serving. So they know that these things can become addictive. So when we make the exception the rule, then we get used to that, and that can become our lifestyle. So what I encourage you listeners, your families, and what I encourage my children is to let the standard be our base. Let that be our starting point so that when we, for whatever reason, have to operate in substandard way, subpar, then that irritates us. It gets like a pebble in the shoe when we know that we're not performing in a way that we should be. And that irritant or that annoyance can hasten us to get ourselves back on track. But if we make excuses, if we are not uncomfortable by not doing the standard, then we can create a problem for ourselves and a problem for others. So what I suggest for the Black community is that those areas in our lives in which we are suffering, in which we lead in the most negative statistics, that we go back and take a look at that and we plot a course to become more successful and have more positive outcomes for ourselves. I mean, we really in our community need to do an analysis, and it doesn't take too deep a dive to see that our experience and the conditioning that we've had has led us to very poor outcomes. And so we have to reverse track, and we can develop standards for ourselves and operate with our standards as the base and let that be our norm. I have seen in so many instances with our people when we make excuses for why we're late. We make excuses for why we're overspending or overeating or being lazy or not maintaining our homes and our cars. We make excuses for not just doing the standard, right? When you get a car, there's routine maintenance. We make excuses why we're not doing some of the things that should be routine that will keep our car in good operating condition, right? If we apply standards to our work and our work goals, to our education and our educational goals, to our finances and our money goals and our health and our health goals, if we go back and lay down a base and foundation as a standard and do everything we can to adhere to the standards, then we will improve the outcomes and we can make advances overnight and be a model for our young people so that they can emulate, and we do not have to continue talking about the legacy that we have in the insufficient areas that we suffer from within our community. But it's not going to occur without a self-examination and without us ridding ourselves of excuses to operate in a substandard way. I hope this episode has been informative to you. Let me know what you think about it. Are you having these kinds of conversations with your young people? As they are coming through high school and entering into young adulthood, into their jobs, into careers, into college, into trade school, into life, we should do everything that we can to encourage them to achieve and to not just settle for being mediocre, not just settle for getting by. Help them establish standards and hold fast to them, because it becomes so easy to fall into a lifestyle of mediocrity, to fall into a lifestyle of subpar and substandard conditions. And I know I want better for my children, and I'm sure you want better for yours and those young people that you have influence over. So let's help them by establishing good habits. Let's encourage them to habituate to the standard and exceed the standard when they can, wherever they can, and to be uncomfortable when they're not meeting the standards. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. I'm so grateful to be with you, and I look forward to speaking with you next week. Until then, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, noramahammed.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.